Mr. Kim is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. Mr. Helvey, I wanted to follow up on something I heard you mention in response to a previous question. You had mentioned that we would be providing continued training support during the withdrawal and after the withdrawal. And I guess I just wanted a clarification. After the withdrawal, what would the training support look like to the Afghan forces? Was that something you're envisioning in country? Is that uniform? Is that contractors? I'm just trying to get a little bit more of a sense of what that training support looks like.
We obviously are, I'm sorry, I won't say obviously. We are, thank you for that question. We are still doing, planning on how we would be able to provide, the type of support that's necessary, from an over-the-horizon posture. And I don't want to get into the specific details, here. I could talk a little bit more in a closed session about what some of those options are. But that support can be provided through any a number of ways. Some of that can be done via teleconferences and other types of connections. Something that we've all kind of learned about, unfortunately, during this pandemic.
One thing we had done in Iraq after the withdrawal there initially was an Office of Security Cooperation that was kind of under diplomatic presence, but still allowed for some trainers to be there. Is that something that's on the table? Is that something that's being actively considered?
As indicated, we are still looking at what the options for a diplomatic presence would be. But as you've highlighted, there are cases, Iraq being one, where we've been able to do that type of stuff through a security cooperation office that's based out of an embassy. So we are looking at the different models that we can employ. And how to be able to accomplish that. What would be done through a security assistance office? What could be done over the horizon? Those are things that we're working on.
So in a previous conversation you and I had, I had mentioned to you questions about overflight privileges within Afghanistan. I know we've talked about it in terms of the complexities, in terms of a potential regional platform. But I just want to clarify, I believe, if I remember correctly, you had mentioned to me that we still would have, after a withdrawal, agreement to be able to have overflight privileges for ISR and other capabilities in Afghanistan. Is that correct? And if so, what was the agreement that you said was still active such that would be allowed?
We do retain the bilateral security agreement that we have with the government of the Islamic Republic of
And that's the
Afghanistan.
2014 Security and Defense Cooperation Agreement that you're referring to?
Yes, sir, the BSA.
Has there been any discussion at all with the Afghans, or are we hearing at all from the Taliban or others that they are seeking to end that agreement with the withdrawal of our forces, or has that not been raised at all in any context? Like, should we be concerned that that agreement can be terminated? I'm looking here, they've been terminated unilaterally upon notice from one side. So I'm just wondering, is that a concern that we have?
I think we will continue having our conversations with the Afghan government, but to the extent that I'm aware, the intention by both parties, the United States and the government in Kabul, would be to retain that security agreement. Going forward, I can't speak to what conversations have been had with the Taliban. We're not talking to the Taliban about that because the government of Afghanistan sits in Kabul.
Okay. Well, look, from our standpoint, we have no, at this point, interest or activity to try to renegotiate that. Our posture is to just try to allow that agreement to continue. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I guess a question then is, if this is a very widespread, and I certainly want to make sure we maintain overflight privileges. I think ISR and those capabilities are incredibly important to countering a potential terrorist threat. But I'm looking through this document. It's very far-reaching in terms of what is still going to be allowable then in terms of our bilateral agreement. So I guess a question, I'm just trying to understand the left and right limits of what the Defense Department understands that they are capable of doing still. Does the agreement being active mean that we would also consider potential U.S. Special Forces raids on the ground in Afghanistan as something that is still allowable under the president's decision? I'm trying to understand if that is still something that you think is allowable given that this agreement still exists. I
wouldn't want to speculate on on that, and nor would I want to get into any hypothetical options we may want to.
But the president has not explicitly said that his decision excludes the potential for U.S. Special Forces raids on the ground in Afghanistan after September 11th this year.
No.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Before I recognize Mr. Gates, my plan is to stop at 1:15, give people a little bit of a break before we then reconvene at 2 for the classified portion of this briefing. With that, Mr. Gates is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this important hearing. I am a frequent and fervent critic of the Biden administration on most things. But when it comes to President Biden's approach to Afghanistan, I want to offer sincere, uncouched praise. I am glad that President Biden wants to end the war in Afghanistan. And let me be clear, I have no confidence in the functional capability of the Afghan government because they are deeply corrupt. I have no confidence in the Taliban because they lie and kill. I also have no confidence that extended U.S. troop deployments to Afghanistan will solve the core problem in Afghanistan, which is that their government is corrupt, they have not endeared themselves to their constituency, and there's not really an appetite to rid the country of the Taliban. In that light, I want to make sure that in these hearings and in our follow-on discussions that we support President Biden in his endeavor to be withdrawn by September 11th. I saw a statement recently from CENTCOM that said that about 12% of the work had been completed to achieve President Biden's objective. And I wanted to ask you, sir, what is your level of confidence that we will, in fact, meet the benchmark wisely set by President Biden?
We do have planning that's underway that is intended to enable a safe, orderly, and coordinated withdrawal along the timeline that the President gave us.
Is the 12% number correct by your assessment?
I don't want to provide a specific number because that percentage may or may not fluctuate on any given day. I understand that United States Central Command is committed to providing, an update, I think, on a weekly basis, and I mean, that probably is going to be different today than it was last time that number was offered.
And General Trollinger, when we reduced our presence in Iraq, we engaged in this process wherein a lot of military infrastructure paid for by the U.S. taxpayer was given to the Iraqi government. Subsequently, we saw many of those same tanks spray painted black under the control of ISIS in the battle, deep in the fight. What are the lessons that we've learned from Iraq, and how can we ensure that as we complete President Biden's wise withdrawal from Afghanistan, that U.S. military infrastructure and equipment does not fall into the hands of the Taliban or other extremists in Afghanistan?
I think as we conduct our orderly withdrawal from Afghanistan, we're taking a hard look at the things that we can transfer to the government of Afghanistan and to the ANDSF that they can use to provide security to the country. I think in terms of infrastructure, we can pass that off to them. They're able to fall in on that. They're able to use the myriad other equipment and supplies that we're able to hand off to them in a manner such that it will enable them to take the fight to the Taliban if and when they need to.
And you can understand my concern is that the Afghanistan government might be the Taliban at some period of time subsequent to our withdrawal, because I don't have confidence that the Afghan government will prevail over the Taliban following our withdrawal. And that is not a reason to stay. I believe it is just a reality. And so your answer drilled down into the usefulness of U.S. military equipment to the Afghanistan government. But what are the factors of the analysis when it comes to the likelihood that that equipment could fall in the hands of the Taliban or other extremists?
I'm not going to speak to hypotheticals. I think there's a range of possibilities.
No, it's not a hypothetical. Tell me about the decision tree when you look at a piece of equipment. You've said the principal analysis is whether the Afghan government will deem it useful. I guess I only have a few seconds left, but is there a secondary analysis that will be done, not a hypothetical, but a contemporary analysis regarding the risk that equipment could be in the hands of extremists?
I think the analysis in terms of the risk is taken at the outset before the decision is made of what to transfer to the ANDSF, to the government, and what to retrograde and destroy.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that. I think Ms. Hartzler made a point about it. And so, Mr. Chairman, I want to echo your call for the committee to have the contracts regarding our withdrawal and regarding specifically what will happen to the equipment. And I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Houlihan, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everybody, all of the witnesses here. I want to start by associating myself with about a half a dozen people who asked, I think, really important questions about safety and security of women and girls in Afghanistan. And
Hey, Chris, your mic, I don't know where your mic is at, but we're not picking you. We hear you, but...
Of course. Let me see if is that better, sir?
That is a whole lot better. Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So I'll start over again. I just want to associate myself with the remarks of the half a dozen members of our committee that were concerned appropriately with the safety of women and girls in Afghanistan. Continue to be concerned about that, but I feel as though that's been covered. And so my question is for Mr. Helvey. Chairman Milley has said that the U.S. will continue to provide financial support to the Afghan security forces. And I know that Mr. Representative Courtney was asking about this as well. What does that look like? If you could kind of elaborate more on that, what exactly are we or would we be funding? And how does that cost kind of compare to what it was or is when our troops are in Afghanistan?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I think there are three basic classes of activities that we would want to continue, supporting and funding through the Afghan Security Forces Fund. The first is to be able to maintain payment of salaries of the Afghan security forces. The second is to continue providing certain types of supplies and equipment to the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, and the third is to enable continued operations and function of the Afghan Air Force and Afghan Special Mission Wing. So those are the three basic classes of activities that we'd look to be able to continue through the ASIF resources. And as I indicated, we are looking at what those options are, doing the detailed and prudent planning to be able to provide for that through, whether it's over the horizon means or distant means that relies on, much less of a large footprint in Afghanistan, one that, could include perhaps something that's done in tandem with the Security Cooperation Office in the embassy. One of the things that is going to be critical as we look at this is the conversations that we have up here and that we have with our congressional oversight to ensure that we're providing the right type of oversight and management controls of those resources to ensure that we remain in full compliance with the law. But certainly, those are the three areas that we see as being important to continue.
And how do you, if you can, anticipate what the relevant costs will be in comparison to when troops were or currently are in Afghanistan? Is it a one-to-one correspondence? Is it cheaper, or what do you anticipate if you can?
I think we're looking at resourcing through the 22 budget submission. I don't want to kind of get ahead of that. I mean, obviously, if there are ways that we can realize cost savings as we do it, we will. But in terms of salary, the salaries, for example, would not diminish with a smaller U.S. Military presence. Similar with some of the supplies and support for maintenance for the Air Force. So I don't want to kind of get ahead of a budget process in terms of what the number looks like, but I would say that we'll require substantial resources to continue to be able to accomplish those three aspects of the ASIF profile, for lack of a better term, going forward.
And with what remains of my time, I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on our relationship with our NATO allies, as they are also making decisions about whether or not to withdraw. Do you think that this will affect our relationship with our NATO allies, our decision to withdraw from Afghanistan?
Well, this is a decision that we undertook together with NATO. In fact, on April 14th, Secretary Austin was at NATO, and we've engaged in conversations and consultations with our NATO partners through this process. And as I indicated in response to a previous question, we came into Afghanistan with NATO. We came in together. We've adjusted our presence together, and we will leave together. This is an important commitment that we have. Just as our NATO allies stood by us in our time of need, we will do this together, and those consultations are absolutely critical. They're ongoing, and they'll continue to go on.
Thank you, sir. And with my last 15 seconds, do you anticipate that our soldiers will be redeployed or will be coming back to CONUS? What do you anticipate to be where they're headed next?
I think I'd have to leave that to the closed session because I'm not entirely sure where they will all go. Some
All right,
will come home,
we'll take
some
that in the
will go.
closed session. General Lady's time has expired. Mr. Waltz is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to comment on some of your earlier remarks, and I think you're absolutely right about our accountability to our constituents in terms of future casualties. I think it's important to recognize that before 2020, before we entered the agreement, we lost 17 soldiers in Afghanistan due to combat deaths. The Army alone lost 20 in training accidents. Much less the losses of the Navy with the collisions and other types of accidents. So I think we need to continue to take a hard look at what our measure of success here, if it is avoiding casualties or if it's protecting the homeland. I don't think anyone's suggesting that we stop training or stop operations because we're sustaining casualties along those lines. But I do think we also are going to be accountable to our constituents. And I think we're going to be accountable the next time we have an attack like Pulse nightclub or San Bernardino, the truck attacks in New York. And to Mr. Moulton's point, we're going to be accountable if we lose additional soldiers fighting our way back in, if the intelligence community is correct that Al-Qaeda fully intends to resurge in the wake of a Taliban resurgence. Mr. Helvey, and for the committee, I want to be on the record here. We have, and I'm glad you agree, that we have a moral obligation, as you stated in your testimony, to take care of those who have stood with us in extremism. We need to get those people out, and I want you to hear that from me loud and clear. Mr. Crow told his story. All of us who have served there have them. One of my interpreters was executed along with members of his families simply for having documentation that he needed to get the SIV visa. So we need to evacuate them out. This 14-step process that the State Department has, I agree, you need to set up a task force and address this bureaucratic issue. But all of that can be done if we get these folks, these interpreters, civil society leaders, politicians, school teachers that have stood with us, if we get them to Doha, Al Udeid, to other bases. Is there anything preventing you from evacuating these individuals, and then we can deal with the appropriate vetting, processing, Congress's authorization? What's preventing you from doing that?
I think that the focus that we have is on, supporting a peaceful outcome in Afghanistan. We are continuing to work with our Afghan partners, and our Afghan partners are continuing to work.
Mr. Helvey, I'm sorry, I appreciate that, but I can tell you these folks, these people who have stood with us are being hunted down as we speak. They are being executed. Their families' lives are on the line. And I believe that when that last soldier goes wheels up, we have essentially handed them a death sentence. So we have between now and when those last C-17 flights leave Bagram Air Base to get these folks out. And you know, General Milley has said he expects 1,000 C-17 flights, much of it with equipment. Where would you prioritize these people that stood with us versus some equipment? I would hope that you would prioritize these people more so. It's not just a moral issue, it's a national security issue for the message that we're sending. And if we do have to go back in, who's going to stand with us again?
We are working with our interagency partners to look at the different tools and the resources and the mechanisms to support those folks that have supported us.
Thank you, Mr. Helvey. No, thank you. I mean, I want to be clear. We need an evacuation plan, and time is of the essence. The other piece here, you mentioned in your testimony, and I think you agree that Afghan National Security Forces are critical to the future. The critical future of Afghan security and therefore the homeland security. President Ghani said in 2019 he anticipates his security forces can hold 6 months without full U.S. support, including financial support. I have real questions of whether this committee and this Congress will continue to appropriate billions of dollars with a power sharing agreement with the Taliban, number one, and then number two, without appropriate oversight of those dollars. And since we will have no one left but those in the embassy, how do you plan, and in the interest of time, please submit for the record how you plan to oversee those dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Escobar is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman, and to our panelists today. I want to thank you all for this important conversation. I think it's clear and that there is wide bipartisan support for helping our partners and ensuring that they have access to what they need to be evacuated and so that we can keep our promises. There's also wide bipartisan support on ensuring that we protect women and girls in Afghanistan. And so I hope that those two opportunities that we have to act swiftly and urgently, that we do everything possible to ensure that we do keep those promises. Gentlemen, the United States has at its disposal a host of tools and resources available for addressing legitimate security concerns, including those posed by violent extremist groups. With the withdrawal of our troops from Afghanistan, can you share with us some of the non-militarized initiatives and tools DOD will be using to continue advancing our interests and peace and security in Afghanistan?
Well, thank you for that question. We'll obviously be working, closely with our interagency, colleagues and counterparts to be able to work with our Afghan partners. There are things that the Department of Defense has and things that the Department of Defense does, that can help to support security. We've talked about some of that in terms of continuing to provide resources to the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. I think that's a critical component to ensure that we've got a willing and capable partner there. But also there's other tools and resources that the U.S. Like the U.S. Agency for International Development would have, State Department would have, our other interagency partners. And we will play the role that the Department of Defense has played historically, which is being a supporting element, working very closely with those agencies and departments in what they're doing in terms of advice or assistance or other development projects. A lot of this is going to hinge on the security environment in Afghanistan. A lot of this is going to hinge on, our partnership with the government in Kabul. But I would prefer to let those departments and agencies kind of speak to, the tools and resources and mechanisms that they have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Since the U.S. Taliban deal was initially signed in February 2020, the Taliban has escalated its attacks on Afghan forces and civilian deaths have spiked, with women being the primary targets. And we've heard colleagues on both sides of the aisle expressed concern about that. Has the department made any special demands that extend protections for women during any of these and any other ongoing peace negotiations and communications?
Obviously, the safety and security of all Afghans, but in particular Afghan women and children, is an important consideration for us. I would have to defer to State Department and Ambassador Khalilzad specifically to talk about what specific demands or conversations he's had with the Taliban as you know, State Department and Ambassador Khalilzad has been doing those negotiations.
Okay. Thank you. When we previously withdrawn or reduced U.S. military presence from countries, for example, in Iraq, and one of my colleagues mentioned that, our withdrawals have contributed to political instability. And since the U.S. withdrawal, Iraq has faced an unsettling rise in civil unrest and it's experiencing political power struggles. How do we ensure that our withdrawal leaves a better legacy with security and stability? And I know there's only 30 seconds left, so if you wouldn't mind, just very quickly.
Yeah, I think a key, and I'll just come back to this because I've indicated in a couple of responses. The key really is supporting the Afghan government and the Afghan people themselves in helping to establish a durable political settlement in Afghanistan. That is the way to best achieve those outcomes. And we are withdrawing our forces. We're committed to doing it in a safe, orderly, and coordinated way. But fundamentally, it's going to be the Afghan people themselves that determine their future.
Thank you. The
Thank you.
gentlewoman's time has expired. Ms. Bice is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this important hearing. As it's been discussed previously, our nation has been at war in Afghanistan for nearly 2 decades. Our service members have served bravely and valiantly in this conflict, and it's denied our nation's adversaries the terror safe haven that Afghanistan once was. We are now on the precipice of a full and complete withdrawal. And while I would like to see that happen, I have concerns that the Afghan government may crumble in our absence. A recent example of this similar situation was U.S. forces being withdrawn from Iraq in 2011. Just a few years after our complete withdrawal, Iraqi army nearly crumbled in the face of ISIS, and U.S. forces were deployed back to Iraq and continue to serve to this day. So I offer this as an example of my perspective and highlight we should be thoughtful in this approach. It would be a shame to see the democratic Afghan government fall and the region reemerge as a safe haven for terrorists. My first question to both witnesses: can either of you give me a sense of how much of the land mass of Afghanistan the Taliban currently has operational control over? And are there any areas that are notable strongholds of the Taliban?
I'll ask my Joint Staff colleague to address that.
I think, if you don't mind, I'd like to take that maybe to the closed session.
You got it. Well, let me follow up then. General, in the testimony, you noted that the administration is planning to reposition U.S. counterterrorism forces in the region to be able to respond quickly should the need arise. Afghanistan is geographically isolated and is surrounded by nations that are less friendly to the U.S., as been mentioned earlier. What challenges would our nation face if the need to take action against Afghanistan were to arise following the complete withdrawal?
I'm sorry, which witness did you direct that to?
I'm sorry. General, it was directed to General.
I would ask you to repeat that, please. I didn't hear the question.
Sure. You noted that the administration is planning to reposition U.S. counterterrorism forces in the region to respond quickly should the need arise. But Afghanistan is geographically isolated and surrounded by nations that are less friendly to the United States. What challenges would our nation face if the need to take action against Afghanistan were to arise following the complete withdrawal?
Again, I think we can talk about that a little bit more in detail in our closed session. However, clearly, we'll face greater challenges than we currently do with the forces that we have on the ground in Afghanistan currently.
Thank you for that. And how feasible would it be for the U.S. to rapidly take decisive action in Afghanistan following our complete withdrawal?
I think it's feasible that they react very quickly if the situation warrants.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Lauria is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen, for testifying today. I want to reiterate some concerns that my colleagues have spoken of previously during the hearing about our withdrawal and the situation that will result from a rapid withdrawal and the potential threats to our homeland. And next, I wanted to pivot to perhaps the picture that hangs behind me on the wall here in my office. Immediately following the announcement of the timeline for withdrawal by September 11th, one of the first questions that was asked in the open source media and the press is, where's the aircraft carrier? Which is frequently the question anywhere in the world. And I wonder if you could comment on the longevity, your plans on how long you think it will be necessary to maintain an aircraft carrier presence in the AOR and in support of the withdrawal or even post-withdrawal. For a presence in the region. And then Mr. Helvey, if you could also comment, as I understand you cover the whole Indo-Pacific, on what impact keeping a continuous carrier presence in the Gulf will have on the needs that we have in other areas of the world, specifically countering Chinese activity in the Western Pacific and South China Sea.
With regard to your question about the added capability in the region to support our withdrawal, I think that will be considered iteratively. Such that once the conditions are such that it's not a requirement, then it would be able to leave the theater.
So can you explain the iterative to me? Like, when is it not a requirement? What else are we going to have in theater? It's been referenced multiple times by my colleagues that air bases, land-based positions from which to operate within the region are limited as our overflight considerations. So what are those criteria you're looking for that would make you say that, yes, we could withdraw the carrier ultimately?
Looking forward, it won't consider hypotheticals, but again, I think there's a range of circumstances, a range of options that could be considered, and all those would go into the decision-making that would determine what resources remain in theater and what wouldn't.
So, General, multiple times today, you and your colleague have said that you wouldn't consider hypotheticals, but is considering hypotheticals not the planning process? Don't we have COAs, courses of action, different things that could result from different things that we can't control, i.e., the other parties involved in this and how they will react? We have different courses of action. So are those hypotheticals, or are you saying we don't have plans for those things? It's a little unclear.
I would say we absolutely considered all these variables in coming up with plans, and I would call them contingency plans for a certain set of potential outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Mr. Helvey, can you comment on the impact on carrier presence within the whole Indo-PACOM area based off having a carrier dedicated to supporting the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Well, thank you for that question. And yeah, in terms of hypotheticals, I think, yeah, there's a hypothetical issue, and then there's also, not getting ahead of decisions that haven't been made by the Secretary in terms of how to allocate certain forces. In terms of, implications for, aircraft carrier presence, we do have more than one. And clearly, I think, we need to be able to have a global force that's arrayed to be able to accomplish the global missions and requirements that are levied against the department. And part of the iterative process that General Trollinger was talking about is reviewing what those requirements are, reviewing the needs of the different combatant commands, evaluating those requirements, and then presenting.
I'm sorry to interrupt there, but our time is limited on this topic. And what I would say is, yes, I'm aware that we have more than one. We have 11. And we struggle to even maintain, a 2.0 presence globally. And, according to both the outgoing and incoming U.S. Indo-PACOM commanders, now Admiral Aquilino, they need more carrier presence in the Western Pacific and the South China Sea and the area to contend with China's actions. So, since this is your area, are you satisfied with the amount of presence that we've had? And are you concerned at all with the additional demand that's being drawn on the carrier force due to this support of the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
I'm satisfied with the decisions that the Secretary has made and how to allocate the forces. I mean, look, if you think about what we need to be able to do to be able to maintain our presence in the Indo-Pacific, yes, having an additional maritime presence, whether it's through aircraft carriers or through other surface combatants, that is important. That presence matters. It allows us to maintain deterrence of aggression and assurance of our allies and our partners, and to make sure that we maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. So those decisions have to be made through.
I apologize, your lady's time has expired. As it stands right now, we are unlikely to get to everybody who's still here by 1:15. So if we could, do our best to move as quickly as possible, I'll get to as many people as we can. Mr. Bacon is recognized for 5 minutes, and then Mr. Golden will be after Mr. Bacon, and then we're pretty close to time, depending on how this goes. Mr. Bacon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you having this hearing. Thank you both for being here today. I did want to make a comment about something that Mr. Chairman said earlier, that we have bipartisan support for this withdrawal based on current administration and the previous administration. I want to point out, too, we've had bipartisan deep concerns as well. Even 2 years ago, I was concerned about the SIVs, trying to get them back home, because no doubt when the Taliban, wherever they're at, if they take over the country, they're going to hunt and kill these interpreters and their families. We have a moral obligation to have a plan there. I also had concerns in the previous administration that we were negotiating with the Taliban without the Afghan government there. I thought that was a disgrace to treat our allies in that way. So there's been bipartisan concerns. We've heard it today as well. I want to commend Mr. Rogers, too, for his comments last month on the Afghanistan withdrawal. Having a hasty undertaking is a mistake that will not be in the interest of our national security. It may seem politically advantageous to get a deal done. The reality is that the Taliban's recent violence shows that they perceive this as a full-fledged capitulation. As I stated before, I've always been skeptical about a hasty withdrawal based on a calendar and not on a conditions-based philosophy. A lot of folks don't realize we only have 2,500 troops there. A lot of folks back home think we still have like 100,000. We have 2.5% of that. And I found that this was an affordable way to help keep the government in power, to suppress the Taliban, working with the Afghan government. What I'm concerned is we pull these forces out, the cost of returning, if Al-Qaeda get a safe haven under the Taliban again, will be much higher in blood and treasure. And so I think this puts us at risk in the long run. So my first question, in 2011, we withdrew from Iraq, and then ISIS filled that void. Is there a risk that this could happen here in Afghanistan as well, Mr. Helvey?
There is a risk that if we withdraw, or when we withdraw, that international terrorist groups like ISIS could emerge and strengthen in Afghanistan. And part of our planning is to try to reduce and mitigate that risk and reduce the threat to the homeland that those groups may pose to us.
You know, the thought is we have a small presence. It's cheaper in the long run than have to do what we did in Iraq following the 2011 withdrawal. And so that's my primary concern. And it sounds to me like we have your commitment to advocate for a interagency lead for the SIVs.
Yes, I mean an interagency process with a designated lead.
It seems to me we have a big obligation to ensure we get this right. And it sounds to me like we have your commitment to ensure that we have an airborne ISR capability over Afghanistan when this is all done.
I did not commit future military forces, but I indicated that we intend to continue the bilateral security agreement that we have with the government of Afghanistan and continue to work with our Afghan partners to be able to provide the type of ISR that we think will be necessary to monitor and assess terrorist threats.
If we withdraw and don't have airborne ISR capability over Afghanistan, I think it's a failure. We're setting ourselves up for a failure. So I hope it's got to be a requirement in my view. And finally, I just want to ask, are we confident the Taliban have broken their alliance with Al-Qaeda?
Can I address that in the closed session?
Okay. Sure, if you think it's classified, we'll do so. That's the concern. If these folks come in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and we get a safe haven for Al-Qaeda again, we'll be back to a 9/11 scenario. So with that, I appreciate both of you. Thanks for being here. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Bacon, part of the reason that we've been able to have the 2,500 troops there is because we had a ceasefire with the Taliban. Okay, and that ceasefire expired on May 1st. So I think when we're trying to calculate, yes, if we could cut a deal with the Taliban to have an ongoing ceasefire where they wouldn't attack us, that changes the equation. But that's a piece that, as we're trying to figure out what the right decision here is, I hope we have adequate respect for that. Absent that ceasefire, it changes the equation, and I don't think 2,500 troops would cut it if they were attacking us, and that's part of what we're trying to balance here. So, but you're right on the visas, and I don't, from this hearing, it doesn't sound like we have a sufficient plan to protect those people. I would urge, and sorry, I got to get to someone else. So just for the record, the DOD needs to do some work on whether it's a temporary protective status, whether it's upping the visas. It has to be a higher priority in these next 4 or 5 months as we head to September. And with that, Mr. Golden is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You hear me all right?
Yes, we got you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just one thing, I would urge you to speak up because it's a little quieter than normal. So just make sure you're enunciating clearly, but we do hear you.
Certainly, and if you're having a hard time, just don't hesitate to interrupt. I don't have too many questions. A lot of what I've heard has already answered many of the questions I came with today, but I did want to just comment that listening to the conversation has at times been a little frustrating and must be disheartening for some of our allies. At times it has seemed that many of our colleagues have predetermined the outcome of Afghanistan's future. Just listening in, it sounds like some people have already reached the conclusion that the Taliban will achieve some kind of sure military victory on the battlefield. I wanted to give the opportunity to General Trollinger perhaps to speak to what he believes the current situation is. What are the capabilities of the Afghan military and Afghan government to hold its own on the battlefield? I know you can't speak with any certainty. There's no such thing as a guarantee on the battlefield, but if properly resourced, equipped, and supported by the United States, even without troops on the ground, do you believe that the Afghan military can perform and prevail?
Yes, I do believe that the Afghan military can perform. They're a capable fighting force. They have sound ground forces, air forces, special operations forces. They're a capable military force.
Thank you for that. And I don't know if this question is best for the general or perhaps for the assistant secretary, but I know that the secretary commented that we believe the best way, the administration believes the best way to preserve the gains that have been made over the past 20 years would be to help support the achievement of a peace settlement. But in the absence of such an agreement, is it the position of the administration to stand by the Afghan government?
Yes, and we do intend to stand by the Afghan government. And, one of the things that we've talked about this morning is, continuing to provide support and assistance to the Afghan forces that are partnering with us, but also, fighting to, preserve stability and bring about peace in their country.
I know you're not unlikely to speak to any number, but in the president's budget request, then the administration is going to request the funding necessary that it believes is necessary to support the Afghan government on the battlefield years ahead.
I don't want to get ahead of the budget submission, but yes, we would envision putting in continued funding for the ASIF program in particular, and we would certainly request support from the Congress for that.
Thank you very much. That's really all I was looking for. I guess just in closing, Mr. Chair, I would say one of the lessons of 9/11 to me was some of the hesitancy of previous administrations many years ago to strike terrorist organizations anywhere in the world in order to protect our national security. I think we've learned that lesson, and I think we've advanced our technologies significantly since the late 1990s, early 2000s. I have great faith in the capabilities of the United States military to defend this country and to bring the fight to our enemies without being engaged indefinitely on the ground in countries around the world, such as in Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't doubt the commitment of the Biden administration to protecting the country from the terrorist threat, and I would hope that they are as committed as all previous administrations have been to taking the steps necessary in striking when we need to protect this country from the terrorist threat. I know the last administration did it with Soleimani. I believe that we preserve the capability going forward. So I just want to thank the general, thank our troops serving around the world, and look forward to working with this committee to make sure that we can continue to support the mission in Afghanistan with or without troops on the ground.
Thank you very much. Just to really emphasize the one point that's come up throughout this hearing is I think there is considerable concern about partners in Afghanistan, particularly interpreters and people who have worked directly with us who want to get out. If the number is 18,000, that's a number that we ought to be able to find a way to accommodate. And as I've said a couple times now, I think it's really important, certainly that the Department of Defense, but the State Department, the whole of government really sort of moves that up on the priority list to go forward, to try and find a way to help the people who have helped us. Now, I will point out, and it's important, that before we showed up, the Taliban were running roughshod over the country and killing a whole lot of people before we even got there. So to the extent that people are planting the idea that somehow our presence created this problem, I don't think that's accurate. As we saw the history of the Taliban throughout the 90s, leading up to when we went in 2001. And I think the record is clear. We have tried to help the Afghan people. But there are limits on what we can accomplish, and I hope we'll understand and respect that effort and the men and women who gave their lives and were otherwise, significantly impacted by that effort, and that we respect and honor that effort going forward. With that, Mr. Rogers, do you have anything for the good of the order?
Yeah, and I completely agree with everything the chairman just said. Also, it kind of leads me into how I want to wrap this up before we go into classified hearing. What we've heard today is when it comes to basing, when it comes to the visas for these people who have helped us, when it comes to training the Afghan forces going forward, we're working on it. I'm of the opinion this should have been resolved before you announced you were leaving. I'm hoping that when we get in the classified setting, we're going to get more clarity. That gives me comfort that we're working on it. It means a whole lot more than we're working on it. But before we consummate this withdrawal, we need to have it worked out and have these things resolved, because these are all very important things that we need to know before we get completely out of there. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I look forward to the classified briefing.
Completely agree. With that, we're adjourned, and we'll see you in about 45 minutes.